Exactly the same time.
Guess who's in here? Yeah, Jenner. I was texting her earlier. I told her you were here.
I am not talking loud enough? Me? I want to welcome all of you. I would like to especially thank John Razier, but I don't know where he is. He's the Cory worker here. He and I carried all 75 of these chairs and carried out all of my furniture. And I thank these people like Bob Matheson. He forgot one chair yesterday afternoon and brought it over to me. And Jane Ann gave me chairs, and I mean, it's just been wonderful. And so it's good to have all of you here, and I thank John especially. I also would like to welcome back our friend Matt. He's outside, Matt Fidel. He's our special guy. He lived here with us. And but before I introduce the real special guest, I would like to introduce someone that really needs no introduction, someone that works his heart out for us. I have been proud to work for him from the very beginning, and that is our representative, Wes Records.
First off, I've got to thank this lady right here. She is the co-chair of my campaign, has been there since the beginning, and I can't thank her enough for all her support, all her work. If we could give her another big round of applause. There's also multiple of you in the room, sitting on the couch, sitting in the chairs, and over here that have been so instrumental in the work that we've done as Democrats in Jasper County. And I can't thank you enough. A big round of applause for everybody. So proud. Secondly, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Thank Carol and Fritz for opening up their home. It's outstanding, and we appreciate it. You know, when I heard Cory was coming, I was so excited. This guy is genuine and real, and I'm very impressed with him. Whether it's his work on education, healthcare, equality, job pay, you name, go right down the list. This individual is real and genuine, and that's something that's important to me. And as you look at this individual, I look at somebody with very high character, great integrity, somebody that's doing it for the right reason, somebody that's fighting for us Americans for the right reason, and that's Cory Booker. I can't thank Senator Booker enough for coming here, and I divide up elected officials, and maybe this isn't fair for me to say this, between politicians and statesmen. A politician is somebody that's going to try and do stuff to get themselves ahead, where a statesman is going to be somebody that puts their needs aside for the betterment of the country or the state. That's what the other thing is, sitting here, if she'll stand up, we have another state representative, Jennifer Converse. Her and the team that we have of now 47 Democrats in the House are just working our tails off. Just can't say enough about our caucus team, our caucus staff, House Truman staff, really to get the majority back, because that's truly the stopgap. The governor's race isn't up this year. The Senate's 32-18. It's a larger lead. The House, we're 4 seats away. This is really our opportunity to take the House back and have the opportunity to have that stopgap so that we can start putting our morals, values, and principles in front of what we've seen the last 3 years. The other thing I guess I would add is out of all the presidential candidates running, I think bar none, Senator Cory Booker is probably the largest help in the state of Iowa from a legislative standpoint, helping us get the word out, raise money, do everything we can do to get back in the majority, both the House and hopefully gain seats in the Senate to get that back. And again, I truly believe he is the only candidate doing as much as he's doing more than any other. So I want everyone to give a big round of applause with you. Carol would like to say a few words, but again, thank you so much.
Yes, I do want to remind you that on the 7th of June, we are having a fundraiser for Wes. I have tickets if you want to see me before you leave. Very important that we keep that. And now I would just like to say a couple things about Cory, and he's the reason we're here. And as I said on Facebook, this Ojibwe woman born on the reservation and her World War II veteran would like to welcome you to our home. And I know you're going to be talking about many issues. And I know what you've said, that you're sick and tired of hearing about thoughts and prayers for the communities that have suffered from gun violence. And in Jasper County here, we were personally touched by gun violence and the shooting of Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh last fall. On October 17th, we were at Uncle Nancy's for a Democratic meeting. Just when Matt got the call from Pittsburgh, the synagogue was just blocked from his home. His brother had just had his bar mitzvah in Tree of Life. He got the call. I'll never forget the look of horror on his face. And we were there, the community of Jasper County, to support him and to comfort him. But it really came home to us of what this means. And I know that you will be addressing this, Cory, because it is one of your policies that I was very much interested in because of this. We are in a hurtful time in this community, and I am feeling hopeful because of our future President of the United States, Cory Booker. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I cannot tell you what it means to me to be standing in your house, Carol, and see this incredible group of people packed in here. I want to thank you for opening your home and for making it a communal space. And I want to thank your family for being such activists and leaders in the community, for all kind of great leaders. And I encourage everybody to support Wes. I have. Don't just do as I say, please do as I do. I want to thank Jennifer for being here as well, who is a rock star in my book and a great rising leader. But I want to get right into it because I'm really hoping we can have a great dialogue. I want to say a few things at the opening, though, and just say this. I am here right now before you because of groups like this in this room. In fact, many of you know this already. My family comes from Iowa. My grandmother is from Des Moines. Her grandmother, my great-grandmother, moved from a coal mining town in Alabama to go and work in the coal mines in Buxton, Iowa. And that's the story of my family, coming from a community where blacks and whites came together, went into the coal mines together, and scraped from the earth, with jobs with dignity, the American dream that they believed in. And this was what was amazing about my life, is that theme of communities coming together to make change. Whether it was humble towns like a coal mining town in Iowa, all the way through the community I grew up in New Jersey, to even the work where I live now in New Jersey's largest city. When I was this young, ambitious kid, I was a Yale law student and moved into one of the toughest neighborhoods in our state. I still live there right now, a low-income neighborhood. This law student was in a hurry to get things done. And I'll never forget, my blessing was, I always say I got my BA from Stanford University, but my PhD on the streets of Newark. My blessing was this elderly man who was a tenant organizer. I was a tenants' rights lawyer, who brought me to a big tenant meeting packed like this, and I'll never forget, I had to take all the information I could to file a complaint against the slumlord. Well, this meeting went on for hours, and I was getting antsy. I had everything I needed. I wanted to get the facts, get ready, file the case, fight in court, And yet every time somebody came up and had their chance to speak, this elderly man who had led the largest rent strike in our city's history would look at that person and let that person go on as long as they needed to. On the way out, I was this impatient kid, and I turned to this elder man and I said, God, we had what we needed in that first hour. That meeting was way too long. And he stopped in his tracks, and he looked at me, and he goes, you don't understand. This is not just about healing the buildings. It's about healing our community. People need to be seen. You need to recognize the dignity of every single person who's struggling without heat in the winter, who's had their family harmed by the filth of these buildings and the cockroaches. It was an amazing moment where he talked to me directly about what I came to learn and became the center of my work, which is this idea of affirming each other, of recognizing who we are to each other, of building stronger communal bonds together, of making sure that we do an American tradition. I love rugged individualism and self-reliance, but rugged individualism didn't get us to the moon. It didn't beat the Nazis. It didn't beat Jim Crow. We do these things together through the strength of our connections one to another. And I worry right now that we are at a point in America where we're seeing that beloved community be attacked by these ideals of tribalism, us versus them, fear-based politics, zero-sum game, where you see a community and a nation that grew greater and greater because we invested in each other, now doing things that are assaults on dignity. This was the community in Iowa where my grandmother's father worked in a bank as a janitor. Jobs had dignity. But now we see folks who are home health workers, who catch extra shifts, who can't even afford to provide for their families. We see small businesses, which were the bedrock of our communities, independent family farmers, that are now under the assault in this economy through corporate consolidation. We see gun violence rising up in our communities, and the response of our leaders is not to do what governments are formed to do, which is to protect people. The response is to do nothing when people are slaughtered. We have a nation now where we see the poisoning of our water. Children from Newark to places in Iowa can't get access to clean water because we're not investing in the kind of infrastructure we need. And while other nations are investing in public education, expanding access to higher education, we're putting it under assault, attacking public schools and public education, making it harder to go to college. I see what's going on in our country, and I realize that these bonds that hold us together are under assault. And one of the reasons I'm running for president is because I still believe the ties that bind us are stronger than the lines that divide us. I do not believe in tribalistic politics. I believe in creating a more beloved community. And my purpose in life, from the time I was learning from a tenant organizer in the 90s, is to try to figure out ways to build stronger communities, to invest in each other. And frankly, that's how I got to where I am. Look, I'll tell you the quick story of a living room changing the destiny of my life, because when my parents in 1969 were trying to look for homes to buy in New Jersey, they were moving up from the South, everywhere they would go to look at houses in the places that have the best public schools, they happened to be white communities, and they would be told that the homes that they were looking at, when the real estate agent would see them, they said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Booker, this house has been pulled off the market, or it's already been sold." They would make every excuse not to sell a house to my parents. But they found a group that met in a living room like this, of mostly white folks, who said, "No, that's not who we are. The lines that divide us are not as strong as the ties that bind us." And they reached out to my parents, put a sting operation together that every time my parents would go look at a home, they would be told it was sold, they would leave, and a volunteer white couple would show up and find out the house was still for sale. Well, on the house I grew up with, they put a bid on the house. The bid was accepted, papers were drawn up, and the white couple then, on the day of the closing, didn't show up. On the day of the closing, instead, my parents showed up, or my dad did, and a volunteer lawyer, and they confronted the real estate agent. Now, the real estate agent this should have been the end of the story, but he was so upset he was caught in this sting operation that he stands up and punches my dad's lawyer in the face and sigs a dog on my dad. And as I was growing up in that home, every time that my dad would tell the story, the dog would get bigger. Eventually he was like, "Boy, I had to fight a pack of wolves to get you in this house." My parents wanted me to know that I am here because when Americans stand up for each other, when they invest in each other, when they put themselves at risk that great things come, that everything that I am, as my father would say, is a result of a conspiracy of love, of people who understood that patriotism is love of country, but you cannot love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. And love is not a sentiment. Love is an understanding that, hey, if your kids don't have a great public school, my kids are lesser off for it. If your kids don't have fresh, clean drinking water, my kids will be bereft of their genius. That in the end of the day, love says that we will fight for each other, stand with each other, and invest and affirm the dignity and the strength of when we come together. Look, when I went down to Washington, I decided to do what a lot of senators do, who have a high sense of self-regard. I decided to write a book. And when your name is Booker, that's a lot of pressure. And I went around to try to find the people from that living room that helped me move. I had to write this story, and I had to fact check. I mean, for crying out loud, how big was the dog? And so I go back and I find the lawyer that organized this whole sting operation. And he was this amazing guy, and he told me he had just started in the 1960s, he just started his business, was struggling to make it for his family, struggling to make mortgage payments. So I asked him, why? Why would you take time then to help black families moving into your neighborhood? And this is what he told me. He goes, well, I remember the moment. And I go, what was the moment? He goes, well, I was sitting at home watching TV. And I looked up the movie he was watching. It was, we only had 3 channels back then. It wasn't so hard. It was Judgment at Nuremberg. The year was 1965. And he said he's watching this TV, and amazingly, they have breaking news. And they go from an ongoing movie to a bridge in Alabama called the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And he says he's home in New Jersey watching these marchers starting in Selma, trying to get to Montgomery, and they get stopped on that bridge by Alabama state troopers who would not let them pass. And then these guys on the bridge, the state troopers decide to just gas the marchers. They shoot tear gas at them. They ride in with horses and billy clubs and start beating them. I've told this story on the campaign trail in Nevada a few weeks ago. A guy raises his hand with oxygen in his nose and interrupts my story just to tell me I was on that bridge. Here this guy on a couch in New Jersey is watching this horror break out as people are getting beaten, bloody, chased back across the river. And what does he do? What's a white guy in New Jersey on a couch 1,000 miles away do? Did he just sit there and say, this is horrible, this is a shame, someone should do something about it? No. He gets up in the name of patriotism, in the spirit of affirming the dignity of his neighbors who may be 1,000 miles away, may be a different race, may pray a different way, but he said, I'm going to do something. And he realized he couldn't afford a plane ticket to Alabama. He realized he couldn't afford to close his business one day. So then he decides, well, maybe I'll just do the best I can with what I have, where I am. And he stands up and he says, I'm going to find out who might need some civil rights help here because I can afford 1 hour a week of pro bono time. He finds that group that met in the living room called the Fair Housing Council, and he goes to work. Years pass, he said he organized other lawyers. More years pass, he said the year was 1969, and he gets a case file in front of him with 2 names on it of a couple trying to move from the South, and the 2 names were Carrie and Carolyn Booker, my parents. I am literally standing here right now because of who we are as a nation, who we really are as a country. That some people standing up for what's right on a bridge in Alabama could change the heart of one man on a couch in New Jersey who could then go on and change the destiny of a generation not yet born. I want to answer everybody's questions today. I'm going to stay as long as I possibly can. But if you want to know who I am, I'm the kid that descended from people in a coal mine, black and white, going down together. I am somebody standing here right now because of civil rights activists and people black and white who cared enough to stand for their fellow American. I'm here right now because someone on a couch watching TV didn't stay there. They stood up for our country and who we are. I'm here because an elder tenant leader in Newark, New Jersey took me under his wing and reminded me that your job is not just to go into court and try to win a case. You are part of a community here. You need to see folks. You need to elevate folks. You need to listen and learn from them. You are a weaver of community at a time that the fabrics of our neighborhood is being torn asunder by forces that some people think are too big and too powerful, but they're not. Because the power of the people is always greater than the people in power. I have faith in us and what we can do, and the challenges in America are not greater than we are. But I'm going to tell you this. This election here, it is a moral moment, and we can't reduce it to being about one guy in one office. This has got to be about something bigger than that. I know a lot of folk are like, hey, I just want a candidate that can beat Donald Trump. Well, I'm telling you, that should be the anti-stakes. That should be the floor, not the ceiling of what we reach out for, because we're better than that. We've got to make this election about a referendum on us, our connections, our spirit, who we are to each other. Because if it's just about one person, I tell you, on my block, there are a whole lot of issues that were going on that were tough before this guy was even elected. Having a criminal justice system that treats you better if you're rich and guilty than poor and innocent. Having a nation that treats addiction with jail and prison and not treatment and mental health care. We have work to do, and I'm standing up to be a president that says, hey, if we have the right spirit, the right movement, if this is about something bigger, then you may think it's going to be hard, but we will get to the day under my leadership where health care in America is a right for every American. You may think it's hard. I'm going to tell you right now, we don't need a savior in this election. We don't need one person to say, I'm going to solve your problems. If I am your nominee, if I am your president, I'm going to ask for more from us. Because I have state legislators reminding me it's not just about putting somebody in the presidency, it's about making sure we take back our legislatures as well. If I am your president, we're not going to let the corporate gun lobby determine the debate on gun safety. We're going to bring common sense to our laws and keep our communities safe. If I am your president, I'm going to do the greatest equalizing force that any democracy can ever have, which is the greatest public education system on the planet Earth and affordable college. If I am your president, the fundamental idea that a human being should be able to control their body, to make their own decisions, I will fight for reproductive freedom and reproductive rights. If I am your president, we're not going to let this trend continue where the independent family farmer is being driven out by corporate consolidation. 3 companies controlling their source products, 1 company controlling who they can sell to. We're going to take antitrust laws seriously. We're going to make sure that every single community has true capitalism, true investments. Fundamental to success, we need to make sure that we have infrastructure that works for everywhere. We need a rural Marshall Plan for Iowa and the Midwest that makes sure that kids have access to broadband, make sure our rural hospitals aren't closing but expanding. We need to make sure that every child born in every zip code has the same privileges that people fought so that my family could move into a zip code and thrive. I want to end with this. That guy Frank Hutchins, who took me under his wing, got very sick and eyesight failed, and he and I used to talk to each other all the time. When I would go see him and I'd announce myself, I'd say, it's Cory. He'd be like, I see you. And I'm like, Frank, I know your eyesight's gone, but... And that became our thing. Hey, Frank, it's Cory, I see you. Well, by the time he was in hospice, I was upset that the room wasn't as packed as this with people coming to see him because he had kept tens of thousands of people with heat and hot water. I was upset that there weren't crowds and balloons and flowers in his final days, but I realized that that was my ego, not his. He knew that life was not about popularity, it was about purpose. He knew that life was not about celebrity, it was about significance. He knew that life was not about how many people show up for you when you're dead. It's about how many people you show up for when you are alive. Yeah. And when I went into his room on the last day I saw him alive, the home health care, the nurse told me, and I love healthcare professionals, they're incredibly undervalued, underpaid people. And I walk in to see him in his final moments. And I walk in and I announce myself and I say, Frank, it's me. And this guy, the nurse told me he couldn't talk. He forces the words out. He goes, I see you. And I walked over and I sat with him as long as I could. I held him in his bed. I kissed him on his forehead. But eventually I had to go. I was mayor of the city. I had to go, and I knew this would be the last time I see him, so I held him for a second, kissed him on his cheek, and I said, Frank, I love you. And he forces out, in this rapid, shallow breath, he forces out, I love you. He would die soon after, and I lost one of my life's greatest mentors. But his last words always stick with me. I see you, I love you. I see you, I love you. This election is about the character of our country. It's not about one person running for office or one person that we need to get rid of. This has to be a movement election where we stand up as each other and don't see another American as our enemy, but see us with a shared destiny. It's about us seeing each other, the struggles that Americans are having trying to make their Social Security checks go far, but they can't because they're too small. It's about seeing the struggles of other Americans who are taking care of a spouse with Alzheimer's and struggling to make ends meet. It's about us seeing each other and standing for each other, caring for each other, loving each other. Our policies should reflect that spirit. Our leaders should understand that you can't lead the people if you don't love the people. All the people. Those that vote for you, those that don't. Those that pray like you, and those that don't. I'm running for president because I believe in this spirit. I believe in who we are. And I know that if we stand together this way, work together this way, love together this way, then our tomorrows will be better than our yesterdays, then justice will roll down like water and righteousness like a mighty dream. I believe if we all lead this way, America will rise. Thank you. All right. I want to get into any and every question you all have, even the tough ones like how much money do I spend on hair products every year? Anything that you all want to ask, I'm game for. It's Carol's house, she makes the rules. But any questions, so many issues from the urgency of climate change to the challenges we have with healthcare. Is anything that anybody's on your mind? Yes, please.
This is a new one for me, but there was an author on television last evening, and I believe he's a journalist, a news person. He's written a book called The Shadow War, and he's talking about how Russia and China are already putting objects up in space to sabotage our intelligence, satellites, etc., that we have in space. And I just wondered what your thoughts are on foreign policy towards these countries that are doing these things.
Yeah, and the author has a lot of fair points to make. I have not read the book, but I'm familiar with it. There's a lot going on when it comes to our safety and our security, and the wars of the future are not going to be fought like the wars of the past. They're going to be cyber warfare. I saw, as mayor of a city, a chief executive, when Sandy came in and took out all of our power, I lost people just by them not having access to power. People who need ventilators, people who need heat and warmth. And so I worry that right now we are fighting challenges that we're seeing. We see most recently with the Russians attacking our elections and having a president who won't even admit that that's a problem, that when he meets in summits with Putin, he won't even challenge Putin on what they're doing to try to undermine our democracy. That we've got to be prepared not just for the problems of today, but the problems of tomorrow. If I'm your president, I'm going to make sure that we are ready to meet all of our threats and that we are prepared for the threats of today, but also the kind of cyber threats, the kind of attacks that could happen on our infrastructure, the kind of attacks that could be happening on our communications. And I want to say also that we've got to make sure that we are prepared by standing strong with our allies. America is the strongest nation on the planet Earth, but our strength is multiplied and made more magnificent when we have strong alliances. That's why I worry about a president that seems to get along better with Putin or Duterte than with Merkel or May, although she's now stepping down. But we need to make sure that we have strong alliances, that we don't put tariffs on Canada using a national security waiver. That's ridiculous as well. And then the final thing I want to say is if we're going to really compete in the future, we've got to grow a better economy than we're growing right now. An economy that's just not just those numbers, well, the stock market is doing well, GDP is up, but you walk around communities and you find people having to get second and third jobs. And you see us having a life expectancy going down in this country because of deaths of despair, opioid addiction, and suicides. something is not working for every single American. And if you want to be strong abroad, you make sure you focus on making your people strong here and giving us an economy that works for everybody. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to turn around here. We've got a visitor, an old friend.
That's my best friend, and she's amazing, just so you all know.
That's really what it's all about.
And she actually has her daughter next to her.
This is my daughter. A lot of you guys know this.
So I want you just to know this. I want you to know my mom has this saying, and you should know this is going to probably happen to you one day. She goes, behind every successful child is an astonished parent. So I hope you astonish your mother.
I won't be surprised at all. She's amazing. Okay, so my name is Amy Moore. I am a teacher and a teacher educator. And as I'm sure you are quite aware, the education world has kind of, a lot have written you off because of your history with charter schools. So I would be remiss if I did not ask you how you feel about that and what your evolution has been since you got in the race to where you are now and what you believe for the future of public education.
So I really appreciate this question, and I always say life is about purpose, not position. And everybody should know that my first job I had was going into an inner city community and fighting. I still live in that inner city community today. I'm the only United States senator, the only presidential candidate that lives in a neighborhood below the poverty line, and that struggles with a lot of challenges just as a result of that. And one of the challenges we struggled with, we had one of the real more struggling school systems in the United States of America, where, again, black and brown kids were just getting the raw end of the deal. And I'm very proud of the work we did. We found a lot of solutions that worked really, really well. We're now the #1 school system in all of America for beat the odds schools. If you're poor, come to Newark, New Jersey. We have the best rates of getting people on to college. And we created a network and a blend of all different types of schools. I don't believe charters are good or bad, depending on the state, depending on the locality and the community, and depending on their practices. Charters could cream the best of kids and do a lot of things. Well, we corrected for that by finding a lot of solutions that worked for us on a very local level. Now, my work in Newark got me my state's largest teachers union has endorsed me twice as a United States Senator. I'm really proud. And they endorsed me twice because they know that I'm not one of these guys that thinks that we should do everything to have charter schools everywhere. I'm a guy that believes in public education. And in fact, I look at some of the charter laws that are written around this country in states like this, and I find them really offensive. They're not about local communities finding solutions that work. They're about raiding public education and hurting public schools. And that's something that is unacceptable, and for me, I will fight against. We need to make sure that we focus on public education and strengthening public schools. And you can't have states that are willing to choke and starve schools of resources and cause the problem and then say, oh, I've got the solution, we're going to vouch your kids out of that or create a second school system. That's just not something I would ever support. So for our low-income community, we found solutions that work. But as senator, I've been pursuing strategies that are similar to the strategies that I'll pursue as your president. In fact, I have a very good record in the Senate of doing things that support public education, support public school teachers, and again, that's why my teachers union endorsed me. But I'll go further than that. If I am your president, the first and foremost thing that I'm going to do is step up to say that we need to fully fund special needs education in America. That is outrageous. And so the first thing I'm going to do is fight for taking that funding, which is around 18% right now. Our commitment should be far higher than that, and that's going to do something which the Federal Department of Education was founded to do, which is to create educational equity around this country. Number two is I'm going to stop the assault on the public school teaching profession. We have a teaching profession that's outrageous. I sat with someone in the airport that told me that, that their communities were so proud that they're raising their starting salary for teachers to $30,000 a year. You try to raise a family on $30,000 a year. That is outrageous. And so if I'm your president, we're going to raise teacher salary, we're going to forgive teachers' loans, because a lot of them are being crushed, and then we're going to make sure that it's not just teachers, but we're doing the same for school professionals, whether that's counselors, whether that's mental health care professionals, whether that's nurses, because we need to make our schools truly what they should be, which is more like cathedrals of learning. And so my vision for public education is simple. We need to defend it, we need to preserve it, we need to invest more in it, and we need to make sure that we don't allow states like I see being done in Iowa, see states that are trying to, and it's actually happening in South Carolina as well, states that are trying to attack public schools, defund them, and then create some kind of private system that actually creates more segregation and less success. All right? Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I work at Deer and Ankeny. I'm a shop chairman there, so we have conversations all the time about how important good-paying jobs are to sustain the things that you just talked about, right? Newton is the great example. I use it all the time when I'm talking to new employees. We had 3,000, 4,000 UAW paying jobs in this one at one time in town, and it thrived then. We had people making decent wages. The roads were better. The schools were better. Property values were better. And so something I always think about, when I send my kids to school, we send Kleenex, we send all the stuff that those teachers need because we can't generate enough funds in this county to do it ourselves. How do we get that money out of Sam Allen's pocket that's pulling in about $17 million a year and put it back in the people so they can spend it in Polk, Jasper, and Marion County to get those funds that you're talking about that our teachers need and our kids need?
God bless you for that question, because that's at the core of, I think, a lot of people's pain right now. So my Des Moines, Iowa grandma married a Louisiana boy, and they raised my mom. My mom was born in Detroit, Michigan, and my grandfather was working on the assembly lines. He was a UAW member, UAW organizer, in fact, and that was a good union job. Union jobs in America have been declining, and guess what's been increasing is disparities in income, as folks have seen wages for the last decades been stagnant, corporate profits at wild highs, as they're suppressing so much of these wages. And these non-union jobs, what they're seeing now is that the wages on those are so hurting that now families have to take second jobs, working longer hours and still not making ends meet. What's happening to our corporate culture is so, in my opinion, insidious in the ways that they're suppressing wages and taking away the dignity of work. It all comes back to work. It all comes back to getting up every day and having a job where you make a living wage, where you can save for retirement and give your kids a better life than you have. That is such a fundamental thing. And so there's a few things we have to do. Number one, we have to stop the assaults on unions in America. And your state of Iowa, I'm sorry, has done way too much to go around Davis Bacon and do all the things you're doing to undermine the ability of human beings to come together and organize for their rights. Number two is we've got to make sure that we have a tax system that doesn't benefit those corporations with loopholes and continue to incentivize them and their bad practices, but shift that, stop this ridiculous idea that if we just give more and more tax cuts to the wealthy, it's going to somehow trickle down. No. Under my plan, we're going to give bigger and bigger tax cuts to working Americans by massively expanding the earned income tax credit. I call it the RISE credit now, where a family both making $35,000, $40,000 a year can get up to $8,000 back from their taxes. And by the way, I'm reimagining what work is. Because if you are that home person taking care of somebody sick at home, you are taking care of somebody with dementia or special needs child, you may not be going to punch a clock, but you're working harder and longer hours, you're going to qualify for my tax credit as well and get $4,000 to $8,000 for your family. And that will take 150,000 Americans and raise 150 million Americans and raise their wages. My plan would cut poverty in a third right off the bat. But let me give you one last thing. Enough of these large multinational corporations hollowing out our country. Enough of these massive, almost monopolies, where from pharma to the farm industry, 2 or 3 companies are controlling, the overwhelming majority of the market share. They're anti-competitive practices, and they're hurting labor, they're hurting consumers, and they're definitely hurting communities. As we've seen here in Iowa, so many towns be hollowed out when the consolidation of banks happens, the consolidation of the farm industry happens. I'm going to put people on the bench that will enforce antitrust laws, and my FTC and my DOJ are going to be coming after these large monopolies that are engaging in anti-competitive practices and suppressing wages. All right? Yes.
I love Amazon because I don't have to carry cat litter home from the grocery store. But I don't understand why they pay no taxes. I can't fathom how one company can make so much money and not pay taxes.
It's because the corporate, she's asking about, she loves her Amazon, why don't they pay taxes? I mean, everybody here who's paying their taxes should be offended that we have a tax code that is so regressive in so many ways. The people that get the loopholes are those that can hire lobbyists, billions of dollars of money to come down and get certain loopholes in the tax code that give them these tax breaks. So let me just give a quick little bit of tax policy. we're going to end a lot of loopholes. We're going to end carried interest, because why does somebody who works at a hedge fund pay a less percentage of their income in taxes than someone who teaches in a school? They should get the tax breaks, not somebody that is going to do the practices they're doing to make their millions of dollars a year anyway. We're going to end the tax breaks for oil companies and extractive industries. Why are we incentivizing people who are then going and outsourcing their pollution on us? And instead be focusing our tax cuts to things that make sense, like creating more investment in renewables. We're going to make sure that we have a tax code that's not controlled by corporate lobbyists. It's one of the reasons why I'm not taking money from federal lobbyists, from corporations. I'm running a clean campaign for this reason. It's because I want to make sure that we close some of these tax cuts so people are paying their fair share of taxes. And the last thing I want to say about the tax code is, look, we need more revenue in our country. We really, really do. I'm the mayor of a city that was in financial freefall in the middle of a recession. You want to talk about hard days that I had staring at budget numbers, trying to figure out how I was going to get my city to the next day, how I was going to meet payroll? We had to do desperate things. And I stood up and made really tough calls. Painfully, but I had to do it. I cut the size of my government 25%, learned how to do more with less. But the other thing is I had to find ways of bringing more revenue in. Now, I was very creative in a lot of the ways we thought about doing it. Heck, I found out that I could raise rental car taxes at my airport, find ways of revenue. Nobody's making their decision whether to fly into JFK or Newark based upon rental car taxes. But I knew I had to bring in more revenue because we had urgent needs to try to build our city, grow our economy, grow our tax base the right way. The federal government, we are running up massive deficits. And by the way, for those of you who hear the Republicans who say they're better at fiscal management, remember, Clinton, Obama, cutting our deficits dramatically, Bush, Trump, ratcheting up our deficits massively. And so if I'm your president, I'm going to find more resources. But I'm going to do it by giving people in this room tax breaks, with my RISE credit, which doesn't stop. Right now the earned income tax credit stops when you get to be retirement age. How many people we know who are retired but still have to take an extra job just to make ends meet? You should qualify for that credit. And I'm going to close the loopholes in order for us to get more revenue so I can invest in those things that we have to do, like investing in infrastructure, investing in education, and more. And the last thing I want to say is this. Social Security taxes are incredibly regressive. If you made in your career under $100,000 and change, you were paying more of a percentage of your income in Social Security taxes than somebody making $1 million a year. And meanwhile, you were paying all those Social Security taxes, and now you have people retiring, and there's over 7 million Americans who are on Social Security that are below the poverty line, and many others who are really struggling to make it. And then the Republicans in Washington want to tell us we have a Social Security crisis. We need to do things to make it even more difficult for those retirees, raising the retirement age, or other schemes like that, privatizing our Social Security. There's a very easy way to solve this problem, is lift the cap on Social Security taxes so that we have more resources. And I'm an original co-sponsor of a bill in Washington to do that, and if I'm your president, our tax code is going to reflect our values. It's going to better take care of our seniors. It's going to better invest in public education and protect our teachers, and it's going to make sure that we have the revenue to make the investments that are going to make our economy grow the right way. Yes, sir. I'm just, sir, I hate to say this is bias, I'm just calling on you because you have a great haircut.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. My name is Dol Arjun. I'm actually migrated in this country as refugees from Sudan by then, and now they split the country to be two just because of war, what I call tribal war. We've been talking about tribalism, and I really like that. And my question, I have two questions. The first one is that in Africa there is a lot of war, actually mostly based on tribalism. And this war, they affected so many population, and that's why you see people like me here is just because of such kind of war. Now, if you are a president of the United States, it has been a big challenge for many presidents. I don't know what is your policy to stop such kind of war, those tribal wars that affect America even if we are here? That is first question. The second one is about gun violence. We're talking about gun violence here in the U.S. We have seen that even my experience here, I have been in a couple states here around Midwest, and most of our kids that are born here, especially the migrants, they are much affected by gun violence. Either maybe through gun or through drug or so many things, and there is a mass incarceration of teenagers right now for especially migrant kids. I don't know what is your policy to actually address this?
I'm grateful for both of those questions. I love Iowa, not just because of the traditions of my family, but Iowa always is ahead of the game on. They were ahead of the game on civil rights. There were sit-ins here before there were even in Greensboro, North Carolina, where the so-called first sit-ins started. You all were ahead on women's rights. You all are ahead on LGBTQ rights in this state in incredible ways. And I've become friends with somebody you know, Mazahir, right? She's the first Sudanese elected. She's a city council person now, and was just in my office in Washington talking about the challenges in the Sudan. So I want to just say, number one, I'm following that situation very closely and looking to do a lot to help with a transition to democracy, which there needs to be now in Sudan, and obviously we still have humanitarian crises in South Sudan that are very much on my radar, and I want to assure you, and I hope that we can talk maybe after or talk to my team about some of the policy things I'm working on as a United States Senator. You asked this larger question about wars around the country, around the planet, and this is where I really worry about having a president that doesn't seem to have a strategy for really making sure that we deal with conflicts around the globe in the way that we have our best strength. Again, dealing with them in coalition with our allies to try to push back on authoritarian governments. Because that's a contest for those of you who don't understand or don't put it in these terms, like I do. I look at the world as free nations, democratic areas that affirm human dignity, affirm human rights, and then authoritarian countries that have a different set of policies. China and what they're doing to hurt the human rights in a lot of places, to a lot of communities in places like Russia. When I was flying into Zimbabwe, interestingly, in southern Africa, with Jeff Flake, a Republican, he and I were flying there to tell the new leader there, Mnangagwa, who took over from Mugabe, to try to get him to hold free and fair elections. He was flying, the new leader, from China. And the headline from that trip was basically the Chinese told him, do whatever you want to your people. We don't care about free elections. We just want your extractive industries. That's the competition that's going on the planet Earth right now. And we need a president that's going to stand up for our democratic systems with our allies to check people like Putin, to check people like the Chinese, not doing what he's doing right now, which is sanctioning our allies and pulling out of international agreements, the Paris Climate Accords, or even the Iran anti-nuclear deal, and trying to go at it alone in a way that violates our values. And the last thing I want to say before I get to what I think is a really important question is, we are committing American troops in ways, and American military resources in ways that should offend everybody here. We have spent trillions of dollars engaging in foreign conflicts, and we should not have been in them in the first place. And it's not just Iraq, which is taking trillions of our dollars. Remember, China's built 18,000 miles of high-speed rail, and we're still debating expanding roads and bridges in this country and letting our inheritance to be decayed. We're spending trillions of dollars in foreign wars and engagement. It's not just Iraq. Well, let me go point to recent conflicts. We were refueling the planes, the Saudi planes that were dropping American bombs on Yemen. Did Congress approve that? We bombed Syria. We didn't say we were bombing terrorists there. We were bombing the Assad regime, which is not covered under any authorization to the use of military force that Congress gave. And again, those bombs, you should think millions of dollars worth of your taxpayer dollars going into these conflicts. So if I'm President of the United States, the last thing I'll say on your first part of your question is, I am going to make sure we judiciously use American might. We stand in alliance with our allies, and we don't do foreign policy by tweet, for crying out loud, but we do it in coordination with a larger strategy. Gun violence. We have been a nation in our past that when children die, when people die, we respond. Yeah. When 4 children died in a bombing in Birmingham, we rose up, black and white, diverse nation rose up and said, that is wrong, and we changed laws. Some of you know your history, remember the shirtwaist factory fire in New York. Yes, everybody's saying yes. When women were throwing themselves out windows. To my friend that's a union organizer, you know union history, that became a springboard for getting lots of workers' rights. When people died in the past, we responded. When Emmett Till was killed, lying in a coffin, that Mamie Till, his mother, left open so people could see his brutalized body. It awoke the consciousness of our country to double down on the fight for civil rights and justice. And now where are we in America? They die in a synagogue in Pittsburgh and we do nothing. They die in a nightclub in Orlando and we do nothing. They're slaughtered in a concert in Las Vegas and we do nothing. They're killed in a church in South Carolina and we do nothing. They kill our children in their schools, at their desks, and we do nothing. And on my block, 2 boys shot about a week ago in my neighborhood. On my block, where Shahad Smith was killed with an assault rifle, where I live, where children on the 4th of July, when they hear fireworks going off, hide under beds and hide in closets because they're still traumatized by the everyday violence going on in America. This is unacceptable. And yeah, I said it, thoughts and prayers are not enough because I was raised in a church where my mom taught Sunday school that faith without works is dead. I am going to run for your president. I'm determined to get there. And if I am your president, I'm going to bring a fight to the corporate gun lobby like they have never seen before. And we will win this fight. Yes, yes.
As a young woman, with all the laws that are changing, how are you going to support the Me Too movement, my rights as a woman? How are you going to support that?
I'm so grateful you asked this question, and I'm one of these guys that gets really frustrated when I hear a man come forward and say, well, because I have a daughter and I have a wife, I have a grandmother, I'm going to stand up. No, I'm sorry. Women's rights are human rights, and you're a human too. And you can understand that when the government tries to tell you what you can do with your body, that is taking away your fundamental liberties. And everybody should be standing up and fighting for it. So I've already announced the actions I will take if I'm President of the United States. I'm going to create an Office of Reproductive Freedoms that's going to deal with this issue all along. Why is it that we have the highest maternal mortality rates for women who want to carry their babies to term? Highest infant mortality rates. That's because we don't focus our healthcare systems. We don't focus transportation access. We don't focus our funding for organizations like Planned Parenthood in a way that give women the full breadth that they should have for reproductive rights and reproductive freedom. I'm going to codify Roe v. Wade as the law of this land through Congress. End the Hyde Amendment. I'm going to stop the global gag rule. I'm going to do all of these things, but I want to make one more point to you that's so important and urgent. I want to reduce unwanted pregnancies. I really do. And what I don't think people who argue this from another perspective, because those words I gave at the beginning of my remark are really not just words for a political speech. I see them, I love them. I hear what they're saying. But what frustrates me is they're pursuing policies that are not going to lower unwanted pregnancies, but actually increase unwanted pregnancies. Yes. When you take away access to contraceptive care, when you assault Planned Parenthood, you who say you're anti-abortion are creating more unwanted pregnancies, and yes, more people who want to see abortion, have abortions. Colorado, I mean, it should be a stunning number. Some people know it in here. They reduced the number of abortions by 40%. How did they do that? Not with a heartbeat bill. How did they do that? Not by making doctors criminally liable for performing abortions. No, what did they do? They empowered women. They gave access to contraception to low-income women because these laws that they're passing are targeted towards low-income women. They're targeted towards minority women. They're targeted towards marginalized women. And so, yeah, my presidency, you're going to see a lowering of unwanted pregnancies. You're going to see an elevating of human dignity. You're going to see women having more power over their bodies and having more reproductive freedoms. You're going to see us push down the rates of maternal mortality and infant mortality. We can do these things. We know how, and we need to make sure we have a president that every day stands up for human rights, stands up for health care, and abortion is health care, and women's rights are human rights. Thank you.
So the current administration, such as they are, has almost created a religion of hate. How do we reverse that on an administrative level? I mean, we can work at it at a local level, speaking out, writing out, whatever else, but how do we reverse the acceptability of hate and ignorance?
What's your name?
Linda Wormley.
Linda, that is a, I love you. Thank you for the question. I mean, it's such great questions.
Actually,
today.
I've got to give some credit to Fran Henderson.
Okay.
I don't want to take
Okay, that response was so Iowa. It's like, no. It's pointing out all the other people. I love this state. I wish you all could have known my grandma. Okay. First of all, I just want to, before I get to the administration, can I just say something as a Democrat that I'm really worried about? I was walking into a town hall in Iowa, a big guy sees another big guy, and I think that he thought he was going to have a great testosterone moment with me. And you know, I'm a former tight end for Stanford University, former All-American football player. The older I get, the better I was. And he puts his arm around me and he goes, "I want you to punch Donald Trump in the face." And I stop in my tracks and I look at him and I go, "Man, that's a felony." And I say that to say, I just want everybody in this room to know, if you are looking for a, when they go low, we go lower candidate, I'm not your guy. Go support somebody else. I'm serious. We have all, this is an incredible field of people who are all coming at this in different ways. I'm just not that person. I'm not the person to fight fire with fire. I'm sorry. I ran a fire department. It's not a good strategy. And I actually think that's what Donald Trump wants. He really wants somebody that's going to be just as, you know, mean-spirited and spiteful. And he, in the divide and conquer politics, he thinks he's going to be better able to divide us against us than we're going to. No, that's just not who I am. I don't think you can campaign wrong and then think you're going to govern right. And so I'm campaigning with a spirit of grace and saying we need a revival of grace in this country. We need a more courageous empathy for each other in this country. And every stop I get, I'm talking about these themes, and I hope that you see me as a candidate that is trying to embody this, not just as a candidate, but in the work that I've done already. In my administration, this will be the cause. I'm going to be tactical in fighting for policy. Everything that I've said, I think we can do, but I think we do it a lot better if we actually talk more about that ideal that you said about love. Lincoln said, the best way I can destroy my enemy is to make them my friend. Now, some people might say, Cory, you're naive. You know, I had one person say, you're just a Padawan. They said to me, and Mitch McConnell is a Sith Lord. I wouldn't want to call him that. But they say that you're naive about politics. Well, I say, okay, I'm naive about politics? Wait a minute. I passed the only major piece of bipartisan legislation. I led it with Dick Durbin on the Democratic side of the Senate for criminal justice reform. We got it done. I've passed major pieces of legislation that are helping create thousands of jobs all around America, something called opportunity zones. That I was in New Hampshire and somebody grabbed me on the way into an event and said, hey, you're helping bring millions of dollars to my community. And I said, I am? They said, yeah, your legislation, which creates incentives to get lazy capital to invest in poor communities. When I was mayor, I had to work with Chris Christie. He was my governor. He was my governor. Look, I can write a dissertation on my disagreements with him. But we had to find common ground. And so this has got to be a case where you have a leader that's opposite than this, that's using their internet platforms every day, spewing toxic tweets and trash talking and all of that. You have to understand that the way I have led from the time I was a city council person was by finding ways, instead of to denigrate, but to elevate. Instead of demean, find ways to redeem, to create a spirit of redemption in our community.
Okay, now get specific.
Okay. Okay. So this is something that I learned when I was doing job interviews. I'm going to get specific, but I want to tell you, I'm not going to show my whole playbook here, but I want to show you what I learned when I was interviewing people for a job, which I'm trying to do. You're the hire. I'm trying to get your support. And when I'm in office specifically, I'm going to be working to what I call, if we keep fighting with the way the game is right now and can't change the game, it's going to be very hard to get things done. I've got to find a way to get more people engaged in the larger cause of our country. When I ran in 1998 for city council, I made the warning that I started making again, which is if you elect me, you're a city councilman then, I used to tell people the warning label I'm smacking on my head is that I'm going to ask for more from you than you've ever been asked for from a city council person. Because what we're doing is not enough, and I'm not your savior. All of us, we are the saviors and the leaders we need. And so to specifically tell you, I'm going to do creative things, like Donald Trump is doing in the negative, to change the way we do politics, to change the way we talk about each other and challenge each other. And the best thing I can give in a job interview is to tell people, past this prologue, how did I deal with the same problems when I was a chief executive before? Well, I was mayor of a city that had a reputation for crime and corruption. I'm not sure why you all didn't applaud me when I came in here, because I'm the first mayor since the early 60s that wasn't indicted for anything. Yes, thank you very much. We had a city that had such a bad brand that people wouldn't invest. I couldn't get folks to come. Big philanthropy, I couldn't get them. I was having a lot of problems because I took over a city that people had such small thinking about, were locked into their rigid beliefs about, and I had to change people's imagination. And I thought a lot of solutions, but let me give you one that I did. And as mayor, as your president, these are the kind of things you could expect from me as president of the United States. Maybe not exactly this, because this is kind of outrageous, but you will see me using creativity that other people didn't do. So when I was mayor of the city of Newark, our city is falling into global recession. Our world is falling into a global recession. I'm already mayor of one of the poorest cities in America that already has 60 years of losing population. And this was the hand of cards I was dealt. And I knew that people were thinking about Newark in small ways. Now, if you go on TV tonight and watch late night talk show hosts, they love to kick cities. I hate when people kick people when they're down. They make Detroit jokes or Cincinnati jokes or Chicago jokes about the violence there. And I was laying in wait for someone to do it to Newark. And I was sitting one night watching TV with my two best friends, Ben and Jerry. And the Tonight Show, Conan O'Brien comes on and says, I hear Newark, New Jersey has a new health care program for the city of Newark. And it was. I found a way to lower prescription drugs for a lot of my residents, get them into primary care. I was proud of it. It wasn't that big of a story, but Conan's now talking about it. So I reached to call my mom, who lives in Nevada in a different time zone, and I'm all excited. And I go reach to call my mom, and amazingly, Conan finishes his joke. He goes, but I think the best healthcare program for the city of Newark is a bus ticket out of town. And I was like, oh, so I didn't call my mom. I reached for my chubby hubby instead. But I had him. I go to office the next day, I sit there, and I have a young person with one of these things film me basically saying, I'm Cory Booker, mayor of the city of Newark. I bragged about my city for a few minutes, and then I said, by the power invested in me, by the people of the city of Newark, I hereby ban Conan O'Brien from Newark Airport. You're on the no-fly list, try JFK, buddy. And I put it up online, and guess what? Viral. The video goes so viral that some ACLU types, who I love, because they're always watching out for our rights, but they call up City Hall and say, you're violating Conan O'Brien's civil rights. And I'm like, God, 4-letter word, man, joke. And then, this is no joke, the TSA clarified, literally took a clarification out on their website that mayors in America can't ban people from their airports. But it gets better, it gets better. So now I'm like holding press conferences about this, I'm acting all serious and so Conan, it becomes such a big story that he has to respond. But like Pharaoh, who had his heart hardened and didn't just let the people go after one problem. You just sent frogs, I would have let the people go. But his heart's hardened, Conan's heart was hardened, he didn't just give up. He actually banned me on national TV by the power invested in by a studio audience from Burbank Airport. Now, for those of you that know LA, that's not a big deal, actually. But it it was on. I go and film another video banning him from New Jersey. It gets to be the #1 story in America. Now I'm going on shows that no Newark mayor had ever been invited on. I'm hanging out with Larry King. I'm getting more earned media in 1 month for my city than it probably have gotten positive media, not about death or crime or corruption, but positive earned media than probably had gotten the previous 10 years. Satellite trucks in front of my home. By the time one woman stood up and said enough, this woman was in charge of trying to create peace in war-torn areas. She was the Secretary of State for the United States of America. Her name was Hillary Clinton. And she literally filmed a video, you can go online and watch it, where she said, in essence, I'm just boiling it down to these words, she said, Cory, Conan, give peace a chance. Conan invites me on national TV. He apologizes to me, gives $100,000 to Newark charities. But this is the real kicker. What do you think happened when I called up people after that? They answered my call. We got foundations that had never come to Newark to getting involved. I got investments in my city, developers coming from all around. I had a supermarket chain that laughed at me when I asked them to come to a food desert. They're now in Newark. I am a creative thinker. I've been handed tough cards before. I've run at problems other people said were impossible to solve. From one of the nation's worst performing school systems that now is ranked the best 30% jump in graduation rates, all the way to a city that had 60 years of decline, and now it's growing in population. People are moving in. And in fact, when I left to become the United States Senator, Newark is 6% of my state's population, but 1 out of every 3 building permits going on in the state was going on in Newark, and sir, we built union jobs with union apprenticeship programs for my kids. That's the creative thinking I'm going to be bringing to the White House to make change that people say can't be done. You are, that's a lot of pressure. That is a lot. You're going to really put the pressure on this really nice person over here. All right, the last question.
Well, the immigration bill that the Gang of 8 put together was a pretty good bill, but it didn't see the light of the day in the Senate. So what would a good immigration bill have to include if you were president, and what would it include for the DACA people in our country?
That's a great question. Great question. And thank you for it. And you're right. In 2013, right before I came to the Senate passed a bipartisan immigration bill. On our economy alone, that bill would have cut $1 trillion off of our deficit. Because bringing people out of the shadows, paying taxes, contributing to our economy helps everybody. And so let me tell you a few things. One is I'm not going to wait for an immigration bill. There's a lot of things I'm going to do right away. I can order down at the border for us to stop the practices that are attacking human dignity and human rights, and separating families. I can make sure that we are doing prioritization and enforcement. A lot of you all know here in Iowa, I know this in Newark, is we're separating families right now. Yeah. There's a lot of folks that are being taken out of our country based on some traffic violation years ago. They're taken away from their American children, their American grandchildren. In Nevada, I was sitting with a 14-year-old girl who was so afraid of ICE that she was saying that her and her friends, somebody was sexually assaulted, that they were afraid to call the authorities or report it because they knew their parents would have to show up and their parents were undocumented. He was an American kid born in this country that was afraid to call the authorities about an assault. That's outrageous. And these are things that from the executive position, I can change the prioritization and end a lot of these practices. And there's a lot more that I'll do from executive action. But the good immigration bill for me, number one, first and foremost, it gives a pathway to citizenship for people who are already here in our country. Gets them out of the shadows. It allows them to pay taxes. Number two, it needs to deal with DACA and TPA, temporary protective status. A lot of those folks, I just was pushing a bill in foreign relations to give temporary protective status for people from Venezuela, from places where there's conflict now. We shouldn't be sending people back. It also would take care of the DACA kids, which is fundamentally essential for me and my priorities. Is these are children, many of them I know. I took a DACA young lady to the State of the Union address because she created a tech platform that was employing about 800 people, and these are the kind of folks that we want to kick out of our country. A kid that's a Rhodes Scholar, fellow Rhodes Scholar, was going over the kids, a dreamer from our country. These are the kind of children we want to kick out of our country. It would include DACA as well. It would include money for border protection, but not a wall that we do not need from coast to cost, which is a vanity product. But a lot more sophisticated things that could help to make sure we're protecting our borders, but here's the rub. We also need to be investing in the kind of immigration judges. We need to be investing in the resources at our border to make sure when people do come here for asylum, that they can present themselves for asylum, and we have a judicial system that actually works for them doing that. So these are some of the fundamental things that I would do, but then I would also look at overall, we need immigration in our country. We have folks that come in here on student visas that get degrees in things that many of us Congress people can't spell. And then as soon as their student visa is over, we kick them out. We need to find a place for the brightest minds on the planet Earth. We need to make sure that there's a lot of folks who are in line to come here, but the process has slowed to a halt. A lot of it's because of bureaucracy. We need to speed that system up because, as you see here in Iowa, it makes you stronger as well. I'm gonna finish with a very candid challenge to everybody here. I'm going to compete hard to try to earn the support for folks. And I hope that if you all believe like I do, not just that we need to beat Donald Trump, but that we need leaders that are going to aspire for something higher. And you've decided today that you want to caucus for me. I hope that you will sign a commitment to caucus card on the way out. But to me, I'm a team player. I hope that one of the questions you ask every single candidate is, if you're not the person, do you commit to us that you will double down and support the person who is the nominee? I saw that movie in 2016 and I don't want to relive it. I don't want to relive it in 2020. We've got to be team players. I'm a team player in the way that when I come to a state like this, I always say there's 3 ways to knock on doors. You can tromp over somebody's grass, knock on a door, tromp over somebody's grass, knock on another door. That's not the respectful way to come and campaign in your neighborhood. The other way is those conscientious people who stay on the sidewalk and they walk nicely, and that's to me a bare minimum. My parents taught me that kind of conscientiousness is a bare minimum of what they wanted from their son. But the best way to campaign when you come to a neighborhood is when you're walking along and you see the newspaper at the end of the walk, pick up the newspaper, bring it to the door. If you see some trash not there, pick up the trash. Heck, I've rolled garbage cans in after the trash man came, rolled them up the sidewalk and put them back on the side of homes. When you come into somebody's community, you need to make sure that you are helping that community when you're there. And that's why I work so hard to raise money for your candidates, because I could be the President of the United States, and if they're still, through the state legislature, attacking unions in this state, there's not much I can do. But what I can do is try to build a party in 50 states. And if I'm the leader of the Democratic Party, we are going to lead this party to an era like we saw decades ago where Democrats were in charge. And I'm telling you right now, we have the technologies that we're not even using right now, things we should be doing to organize and engage people that we're not doing. I'm tired of running around. I was just with John Tester reintroducing our ag bill where we're putting a pause on corporate consolidation. And John Tester had me up in Montana. He joked with me. He says, "I need you to come up to Montana and help me get out the black vote." And I said, John, I'm going to find those 5 people and talk to everyone. But I go around. I've gone around to pretty much every state from Alaska to Florida, campaigning for other folks. And often I'll come into a community and somebody will put their arm around me. They say, "Hey, we'd like to have you here, but why do you all only show up when it's election time?" We need to build a 50-state party from the local elections on up, so that we can start fighting for things that make a difference in people's lives. And by the way, I'm one of those Democrats to say, we need to start doing things that make people's lives better, because Democrats have done things that have made people's lives worse. Some of our ag policy, our criminal justice bill of 1994, I can go through the things that I saw Democrats doing that were hurting my community, and we need to stop those things. But I say that as a precursor to say, look, I'm here today to try to encourage you to support me in this. I'm here today to try to get some folks from this room to even break early, like some of my early endorsers, some of my great early endorsers, and join us in this movement election. We want to make about this something bigger. But really what I want to leave you with is a challenge, because you guys are engaged Democrats, and I'm grateful. And I really want to leave you with the ultimate challenge, which I think is this moment right now. I had this family that told me such lore about who we are. Imagine being a black family growing up in a white community. My dad used to call us the 4 raisins in the tub of sweet vanilla ice cream. and every day, hearing around my kitchen table stories of bigotry, stories of hate, but parents who would always check that with telling me about the deep, essential goodness of Americans. And that we're here because of people that met in the living room or a white guy on a couch. We're here because of Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner, black, white, Christian, Jewish, who were willing to die together. We're here because Americans saw beyond color, saw beyond race, saw beyond religion, and joined together in a cause, not just a kumbaya moment, but to join together for the cause of our country, for greater justice and greater liberty and greater opportunity for every single generation. That's the stories I heard around my kitchen table. And then when I went out to the world, whether it was my high school football team that elected me captain, and won the 1986 state championships in New Jersey, by the way. I told you, the older we get, the better I was. But I experienced the best of who we are. But this is my concern. And one of the things that's making me run really hard, not my ego, not just my candidacy, it's us. We went from this nation that had big dreams and bold aspirations to suddenly thinking small, and I have an election where people keep telling me this is just about getting rid of Donald Trump, and I'm like, no, please. Please, my kids were still drinking out of bottled water because there was lead in my tap before Donald Trump. My criminal justice system failed them before Donald Trump. There were shootings on my block before Donald Trump. I saw the failure of the war on drugs before Donald Trump. I saw assault to women's rights before Donald Trump. Union membership was going down before Donald Trump. Why can't we make this election about us again? And our big visions and our bold ideals and the power of the American dream. And that's why I want to end you with this. I want you to go with me in your mind right now to where Martin Luther King was slain. I wasn't alive there, but to hear the stories from my elders, black and white, Asian, all the people about what that did to this country when he was assassinated, the hurt and the pain, the feeling of despair. I learned in Newark from a woman on the 5th floor of the projects who lost her son who was murdered in the lobby of one of the buildings I would eventually live in, who taught me that hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. It is Americans who turned their wounds into work, who turned their outrage that got them out working, who turned their pain into purpose to keep fighting and keep pushing for bigger and bolder dreams. And I want to take you to that point in Memphis, Tennessee, at the Lorraine Motel, where King was in Memphis to fight for workers' rights, the dignity of work, and an assassin's bullet killed him. What did they choose to write right there on a block of stone where he was killed? It's words from Scripture. Now, I'm one of these guys that always says, before you tell me about your religion, show it to me in how you treat other people. Yeah. I'm one of these folks that says I would much rather hang out with a nice atheist than a mean Christian any day of the week. Okay? Please. I'm one of the most soulful people I've met. Do not subscribe to any religion. But I want to leave you with that scripture as my real challenge to you. I hope I'm your choice. I hope you caucus for me. I hope I'm your nominee. I hope I'm president. You will see things that you have never seen before in a fight for love, a fight for dignity, a fight for grace from that office. But whatever, I want to leave you with this challenge. And this challenge is the words from Scripture that they wrote right there where King was slain. It's a challenge to all of us who would go on living despite our pain in that moment. It would be for generations not yet born. And the words from Scripture are the words of Joseph, who said, Joseph's brothers, who said this about Joseph as he was approaching in the distance with his coat of many colors and his interpreter of dreams and favored by their father. And they were jealous of him. And they uttered these words when they saw him right before they threw him into the pit, into a well to die. But he wouldn't stay in that pit. He would rise up out of the pit, go on to lead a nation through crisis. We are in a pit. A pit of pain, a pit of hurt. Our public schools, our workers' rights, our senior citizens, we're in a pit right now. Somewhere in America right now, there's someone who's hurting. I talked to a veteran with PTSD in the airport. There's somebody right now considering suicide. There's someone right now in despair. And if one American is in the pit for an unjust cause, we are all there with them. This is the election that's going to decide whether we rise up for the pit or we divide against ourselves. And so what does it say? Joseph's brothers' words about Joseph, right where King was slain. If you went to the Lorraine Motel, you would see this. It says from Scripture, from Genesis, it says, "Behold, here cometh the dreamer. Let us slay him, and see what becomes of the dream. What now will become of our dream? The dream of America, the dream of our ancestors, the dreams that they fought and died for on beaches in Normandy, in Mississippi when it was burning. What will become of our dream? Will it become diminished? Will it become diluted? Will it become divided against itself? What will become of the dream of our nation? That question can't be answered by past generations. They gave the best measure of their devotion to this country. It's our turn now. We've got to answer what will become of the dream. We have the obligation not to think small. It's time for our generation to dream again. And if we dream bold dreams and courageous dreams and defiant dreams, I promise you, if we follow that up with work and some struggle, some good old-fashioned American grit, then we can answer this moral moment, we can answer this crisis, and our nation will not remain in that pit. We can heal, we can help, we can tie back the bonds of our fabric of our communities. If we dream like that in this moment and don't make this election small, but make it about a referendum on the dream, I promise you we will not remain in that pit. I promise you that we as a country, we will rise. Thank you.